Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we worked on updating our world scene to have our NPCs, and we updated our code to have our NPCs move around our world. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There will also be links to previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. Alright, so now that we have our core logic for NPCs in place, it's time for us to go ahead and take a break from our world scene, and now we're going to start building up some additional functionality in our game. And so we're going to start by focusing on our title screen and our options screens. And so for our title screen, this should just be a very basic screen with a background, with options in our menu to allow the player to start a new game, continue their save game, or to go to the options scene and set some settings. In our options scene, we're going to allow the player to configure settings for our game, such as our text speed, skipping battle animations, changing some of the menu colors, and just a few minor things like that. And then finally, once we have our two scenes built out with what we want to do, we're going to circle back and add in logic for saving this data and persisting it between sessions in our game. So go ahead and get started. What we'll do is we'll come back to our code. The first thing we need to do is we need to define a new scene. So if we can come over to our source code, let's go ahead and go into our scenes folder. And let's go ahead and make a new file, and we're going to call this title scene. So we'll do title scene.js. Then what we want to go ahead and do is let's pop open our preload scene, and let's go ahead and copy the top part of our code here for where we export out our class. We'll grab our import, and then let's go ahead and grab our scene keys. So then what we'll want to do is let's go ahead and close our class. We'll update our class name to be title scene. And for our key, we need to go ahead and add in title scene. So let's go ahead and jump over to our scene keys. We'll go ahead and add in title scene. For our value, we'll use the same. And let's jump back to our code. And we'll go ahead and change that to title scene. So now that we've created our new scene instance, what we want to go ahead and do is add this to our configuration so then we can actually switch to the scene. So let's open up our main.js file, and after our battle scene, let's go ahead and add in title scene. And then finally for testing, let's go back to our preload scene, and we'll go ahead and start our title scene when our game starts. All right, so before we start adding some more code, let's go ahead and take a look at what we'll be building. And so for our title scene, it's going to be pretty basic. We're just going to have a nice background with this panel image and then the Monster Tamer logo on our scene. And then we're going to have our menu component. And so our menu component is going to be a container with a background image and then just some text options. So then that way we can select what our player wants to do in our game. So what we'll do is let's jump back to our code. Let's come to our title scene. And let's go ahead and add it in our create method. And then in our create method, let's go ahead and copy our console log statement from our preload scene. And we'll go ahead and change this to title scene. And then let's just go ahead and some comments for what we're going to go ahead and tackle. So what we're going to do is we're going to need to create our title scene background. We'll need to go ahead and create our menu. We'll need to go ahead and create our input cursor. And then we'll go ahead and add in our fade in effects and fade out effects when we do our scene transitions. So to start building our scene, what we need to do is we need to load in some of our assets that we previously added to our project. So what we'll do is let's go ahead and open up our asset keys file. Let's go ahead and copy our last export. We'll paste it and let's update our name. So we'll have const and we will do our title asset keys. For our object, we're going to have our background. We're going to have our title. And then we'll have one more, and this will be called panel. So these are just going to represent our assets that we saw in the example here. So now that we've defined our asset keys, let's jump to our preload scene so we can go ahead and actually load in these assets. So what we'll do is at the bottom of our preload method, after we do our character images, let's go ahead and add our UI components. So let's go ahead and copy this line here for where we load an image, because we won't be doing sprite sheets. And let's go ahead and update our references. So we are going to have our new title asset keys. And we'll do background. And then for our path, This is going to be under our Monster Tamer asset path, and then we will have UI title. This will be background.png. Let's go ahead and copy this. We'll paste it twice for our two other assets. So after background, we'll have our panel, and then we'll have our title. And then for our panel, this is going to be title background PNG. And then we'll have our title text PNG. So now that we've loaded in our assets, what we can do is actually create these game objects in our title scene. So we'll come down where we create our title scene background, and let's add an image. And so our image game object will position at 0, 0, and we will have our title asset keys, and we'll add in our background. And then what we'll do is we're going to update our origin to be 0, so we can position on the top left corner. And let's go ahead and set our scale. We're going to do 0.58. This is a pretty big image. We want to scale it down some. So now when we save, we see our new background image on our scene. So now let's go ahead and add in our title and our title background. So let's copy this logic here. We're just going to paste it twice. And now, so we'll go ahead and do our panel, because that'll be the background for the title. And so for our panel, we want to go ahead and position this at this.scale.width divided by 2. And then that way it's halfway in our scene. And then for our Y position, we'll do 150. We can go ahead and remove our set origin. And then for our set scale, we're going to go ahead and do 0.25 for both our X and Y. And then we'll go ahead and modify our alpha so we can have some opacity on our image, and so we'll do 0.5. So then for our title text itself, so this will be our title. We want to go ahead and position this in the same X position, so that way it's centered horizontally in our game. So we'll do that for our X value. For our Y value, we'll also go do 150. Let's get rid of our origin. For our scale, we're going to do 0.55. And we will also update our alpha a little bit. So if we go ahead and save, we should see our game refreshes. And now we have our background, our panel, and then our nice title here. All right, so now that we set up our background for our scene, we need to go ahead and actually create our menu. So for our menu, we need to go ahead and load in a new asset. So let's jump over to our asset keys real quick. And we'll come up to our UI asset keys. And so in our UI asset keys, we're going to go ahead and add in a new asset. We're going to call this menu background. And then for our menu background, we'll go ahead and have our value. So then let's jump over to our preload scene. And let's go to where we load in our UI assets. And we'll copy this line here. And we will change this to be our menu. And now for our location, this is actually going to be one of our Kenny assets. So we'll have our Kenny's asset path. And then we'll have our UI space expansion. And it'll be our glass panel PNG. So then with our new asset, let's jump back to our title scene and we'll come down to where we want to create our menu. All right, so our menu is actually made up of a few different game objects. We're going to have a container to house all of our child game objects. We'll have an image game object for our background here, and then we'll have 3 text game objects for our various menu options. So what we'll do is let's go ahead and add in our background first. So we'll make a new variable, do const, we'll do menu bg will be equal to this.add image, and we'll add our image game object. For our position, we're going to do 145, and then we'll do 0 for our Y position. And let's go ahead and grab our UI asset keys, and we'll do our menu background. Let's go ahead and reset our origin to 0, and we'll go ahead and scale this. So we'll do set scale, and we'll do 2 and 2 for our X and Y values. Then what we'll want to do is we'll want to create our container, and we'll add our menu background to it. So we'll make a new variable. We'll do const menu container will be equal to this.add.container. And then for our container, we'll position this at 0, 0. And then for our child game objects, we'll add in our menu background. So now that we have our container, we're going to go ahead and use the set position method to go ahead and position it. So we'll do our menu container, and we're going to do set position, and we'll do this.scale.width divided by 2, so we position it in the middle horizontally in our scene. And now we need to go ahead and subtract how big our menu is going to be. And then that way our new position will be offset to the side a little bit. So that way our menu will still be centered. And so to keep track of that, we're just going to make a new variable. So we'll do menu bg and we'll do width. And we'll divide that in a second. And then we want to go ahead and divide that by 2 because our width, we only want half of it. So then that way position off to the X a little bit. So then we need to provide our Y values. We'll do 300. And we'll go ahead and make our new variables. So do const menu bg, and we're going to do 500 pixels for our menu. So now when our game saves, we should see our new container with our image game object, and it's centered in our screen here. All right, so now that we have the container and our background, let's go ahead and add in our game objects for our text. So after we create our image game object, let's go ahead and make a new text game object. Let's do const new game text is going to equal to this.add.text, and we'll go ahead and take our menu background width, and we're going to divide it by 2. We'll go ahead and do 40, and then let's add for our text. We'll do new game. And now we need to go ahead and provide our styling. So we'll just do an empty object for the time being, and let's do set origin, and we're going to do 0.5. All right, and so for our text, what we'll do is we'll copy some of our text from our battle menu. So if we can go ahead and open up our battle menu, and we'll go into our config. Let's copy our text game object from there, style. We'll come to the top of our class and our title scene. We'll paste it. And we're going to go ahead and update our name just to be menu text style. And we'll need to import in our Kenny key. And then for our color, let's go ahead and change this to be, we'll use a hex code. We'll do 4D4. We'll do A49. And we'll go ahead and do 30 pixels. And then so what we'll do is let's come back down to our text game object, and we're going to reference our new style. So we'll have our menu text style. All right, and then let's add our text game object to our container, and that way it should be positioned properly. So let's go ahead and do this 2 more times, and so we're going to add in options and continue. So we'll paste this twice, and then so for our first one, we'll have continue text. And for our position, we will do 140. We'll still have it in the same X value, and we're going to change this to continue. And then for our third one, this will be options. And this one will be 140. This one should only be 90. So we'll increment our Y by 50 pixels as we position our game objects. And let's go ahead and update our variable, and we'll do option text. And let's add these to our container. So we'll have continue text, and we'll have option text. All right, so next what we want to do is we need to add in our input cursor to know which option is actually selected on our menu. So if we come to the top of our class, let's add a new property to keep track of this game object, because we'll need to update its position in our update method. And so we're going to call this main menu cursor phaser image game object. And for our type, this will be our phaser, and it's going to be a game object, and it's going to be image. Then what we'll do is let's go ahead and create this. So we'll come down to where we create our cursors, and so we're going to do this. We'll have our new property. We'll set equal to this.add.image, and so for our image, we'll need to have our X position. And so we're going to make a new variable. We'll do player input cursor position dot x, and so we're making this an object similar to what we've done before, because as we move our cursor, we'll need to reuse this value in multiple spots. So then we'll go ahead and add in 41 for our Y value, and now we need our assets. We'll do our UI asset keys, and we'll do our cursor, and then let's go ahead and call set origin, and we'll go ahead and set this to 0.5, and then let's go ahead and do set scale. And we're going to scale both our X and Y by 2.5. Now let's go ahead and define our new position objects. We'll come to the top of our class, and let's make that new variable. So we'll do const our player input cursor position is equal to an object and our X value. is going to be 150. And we're just going to go ahead and wrap this in object freeze. Go ahead and close that. All right, we'll go ahead and save. So now that we have our cursor, what we want to do is we want to add that to our game container. So let's go ahead and copy this. And then we'll do our menu container. And we'll do add. And then let's go ahead and add in our game object. So with our new game object, we're going to go ahead and we need to update our background image to be a little bit bigger. So then that way it's not outside our border. So what we'll do is in our background, we're going to go ahead and change this to 0. We'll go ahead and change this to 2.4 for our X value, and we'll keep it at 2 for our Y value. And so it looks like our code's still a little bit off. And so the reason for that is what we're going to do is for our background, we're going to come back and we're actually going to scale our menu background using the 9-slice scaling technique. And at a high level, what that's going to do, it allows us to take our original image and then cut it into 9 pieces. So then when we scale it, it's going to scale it and look very crisp. So right now, when we're scaling our image, you can see it's starting to get a little bit blurry because we're kind of stretching and distorting that. We really don't want to do that because our original image looks very nice. So if we take a look at our assets and we go into our images, Kenny's assets, and if we do our glass panel, we see we have these nice crisp borders here, and because we're scaling it, it's starting to look very blurry. It doesn't look that great. And so when we do this 9-slice scaling technique, we're going to end up putting all of our new images into a container. And so we'll place that container inside our main menu background container here. And then we'll use that for all of our positioning. And so since we're going to go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and we're just going to add a to-do. So we're going to do to-do, replace with a 9-slice image. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and make a new container. So after our menu background, let's make our new container for the time being. And we'll do menu, bg, and we'll do container. It's going to be equal to this.add.container. And so inside here, we're just going to do our menu background for the time being. And then once we create that 9-slice images, all those image game objects will be placed inside here as well. And so with our new container, let's go ahead and update our main menu container. We won't need our background. Instead, we're going to have our menu BG container. And then likewise for our cursor, that's going to be placed inside our new container as well. So we'll have our menu BG container, and we're going to add our game object. All right, and then one last thing we need to change, we're going to go ahead and update our X position for our background. So we're going to change this to 125, and now we can see with our new subcontainer, everything's positioned correctly. All right, so one last thing we're going to do with our cursor is we're just going to add a small tween so it's animated. So after we add it to our container, let's do this. We're going to do our tweens. We'll do add. And so for our configuration for our tween, what we'll want to do is let's do our delay. We'll do 0 milliseconds. Duration, we'll do 500. Repeat, we're going to go ahead and do -1, so it just repeats indefinitely. And we're going to update our X position. And so for our X position, we're going to do from, and we're going to reference our player input cursor position X value. We're going to do the same thing for our start value. And then for our 2, we're just going to go ahead and move it over a little bit. So we're going to use that player input cursor position. We'll do our X value, and we'll just say +3. And then we just need to add our target. And so we're going to do this, and we'll do our main menu cursor phaser image game object. So now when we save, we'll see our cursor just kind of goes back and forth like this, and just a nice little animation there. Alright, with that, that actually brings this video to an end. In our next video, we're going to continue working on our title scene, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add our logic for moving our input cursor and updating the currently selected option in the menu. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the police source code for this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.